had that to fight.
You may say I'm a dreamer.
Guilty.
But I'm not the only one.
I hope
someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Imagine
No possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger.
Brotherhood
of man and woman. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer.
Dreamers here, right? We can make it real. But
I'm not the only one.
No, no. I
Hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Okay, so we're going to do an original song for you.
That was
This
original,
man-
but it was original by someone else.
We love John Lennon. So, oh, this is, wait, I don't want this one.
Oh.
We have so many instruments, we don't know what we're doing. So Mike wrote this song called The Economy Depends on the Ecology. And for short, it's called Economology. 1, 2, 3.
There's a lesson that is dawning on humanity, a species that has suffered from insanity. It's a very simple lesson of prosperity. The economy depends on the ecology. Many years back in old Iraq, agriculture was invented. Population increase, cut down all the trees. Now that place a desert. The economy depends on the ecology. Economy depend on the ecology. From a land and sea come prosperity. The economy depend on the ecology. See, you and me are the economy, and we depend on the ecology. If the world isn't healthy, neither will we be. Economy depend on the ecology. There was a place called Love Canal, and people had to work aplenty. But a factory man put poison in the land, and now that town is empty. The factory depend on the ecology. The factory depend on the ecology. Don't poison the land, Mr. Factory Man. The economy depend on the ecology. I don't think war will solve a problem. It only brings devastation. Let's stay home and take care of our own land, and we will have a stronger nation. Democracy depend on the ecology. Freedom depend on the ecology. Your side, my side, everybody. Everything depends on the ecology. A university depend on the ecology. The factory depend on the ecology. Baseball, football, democracy, everything depend on the ecology. You and me depend on the ecology. She and he depend on the ecology. All of we depend on the ecology. It's a lesson that is dawning on humanity. That's Sharon Abreu on the steel mando drum fiddle.
Do one song for you, and then we're going to turn it over to our next panel. Seems like a very appropriate song for this gathering. Dennis Kucinich talks about a peace room and what that is. It's a room, but it's also not a room. It has walls, and yet it has no walls. And I got so inspired by that vision of the peace room that I wrote a song called The Peace Room. And it's going to be on our new CD, which is not quite out yet, called The Peace Room. And I don't want the capo on there either. Yeah. So maybe close your eyes and just imagine what this would look like for you.
Or maybe we don't have to. Maybe we are in the peace room right now.
I feel it.
We have imagined it. One of the lines is, if we build it, they will come. And I think we built it and we came.
Here we go. When the wars have left us broken in a world of greed and fear, when we've reached our end and we have to mend, there's a place and it's right here for peace to heal our spirits. Oh yes, we'll be there soon. A living place, a healing space. Step inside the peace room. Its function is to welcome the emergent beings of Earth. It's space to safely welcome a planetary birth. So clearly in my vision, I feel its resonance, a field in which we all are one. If we build it, they will come. In the peace room, there's room for all. We share our stories, hear our call. Creativity's exchanged. No one can enter and not feel changed. Its walls extend beyond our sight into a field of endless light, where deepest, highest aspirations bloom. Step inside the peace room. Through this great vision that we share, we can replicate it anywhere. It resonates through every land in a language we all understand. Our voices will reverberate, shift frequencies, and soon the new millennium will start here inside the peace room. In the peace room, there's room for all. We share our stories, hear our call. Creativity's exchanged. No one can enter and not feel changed. Its walls extend beyond our sight into a field of endless light, where deepest, highest aspirations bloom. Step inside. Step inside the peace room. Welcome to the peace room. And thanks for being here. Thank you so much. We'll be back for some more music tomorrow evening, and I hope you'll be here with us. Thanks.
So we can unplug these? Yes? Good? Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome. This is the session. It's the panel, Combining Movements Globally. And we have first Emily Wurth, right here next to me. We're happy to have a local DC activist with us. She's from Food and Water Watch, and she's the co-organizing director here in DC. Emily has a Bachelor's of Arts in International Studies and a Master of Public Health degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks so much. First, I want to thank World Beyond War and everyone who worked so hard to put together the conference. I know how much work goes into that. I've really enjoyed my time here, and I've already learned from all of you. So, yeah, I'm Emily, the co-organizing director. And for those of you who might not know about Food and Water Watch, we are a nonprofit organization working to promote policies that ensure healthy food and clean water for all. But we believe in standing up to corporations that try to put profits before people, and advocating for a democracy that improves people's lives and protects our environment. And we're based here in the US. We also have colleagues, though, who work in Europe and Latin America, so I'll be talking some about the global work. And we work very closely with grassroots groups around the world. One of our goals is to really support and bolster the efforts of grassroots activists who are working to protect their communities. And we believe the only way we're ever going to accomplish our long-term goals, whether it's for peace, justice, protecting the environment, is by engaging large numbers of people to get them involved and hold their elected officials accountable for the kind of world that we want. So I hope today to just lay out some of the connections I'm sure that many of you know between the environment, environmental justice, which I know we'll hear more about, the climate and peace movements, kind of from the frame of the work that we're doing, because that's what I know. And then to talk about a few examples where we've worked globally, and then, you know, I just think this political state right now necessitates that we foster deeper collaborations between all these movements. We have so many shared goals to increase our political power and to work for a more just, peaceful future, and really on a planet that will be livable for people. So at Food and Water Watch, we originally worked on fighting factory farms and the corporate food system that made it really hard for farmers to make a fair living and for people to have access to healthy food. We also, on the water side, I've done a lot of work on water, opposed water privatization and advocated for increased funding of our water and sewer systems so that people have access to safe drinking water and don't have the issues that we see now in Flint, Michigan, and in places where people can't afford their water from shutoffs and everything else. But we, you know, it kind of shows how these issues are connected, how we evolved over time. In about 2008 and 2009, we started receiving a lot of calls on the water program, which I was working in, from people in Pennsylvania and New York who are worried about fracking contaminating their drinking water. And at the time, we weren't really working a lot on energy issues, but started doing some research and realized how dangerous this new era of extraction was, how little research there was on it, and how it was exempt from federal regulations, including the Safe Drinking Water Act, and many, many others that I won't go into today. And made a decision that we were going to stand in solidarity with the grassroots movement in New York and come out for a ban on fracking. We were the first national group to do that. And at that time, their studies were just beginning to come out about the issue. Now we know there's a growing body of research on the public health effects of living in close proximity to drilling and fracking. I mean, pretty serious findings, including increased risk of premature births and high-risk pregnancies, and I could go on and on about that too, but won't. But you know, what we now understand too is that methane is emitted in the process of drilling and fracking for both oil and natural gas. In the East Coast, there was a lot of discussion about fracking for gas, but a lot of the fracking in recent years have been for oil, and the natural gas industry has disingenuously been promoted as a clean bridge fuel, an alternative to, you know, a transition to renewable energy, when in fact most of the fracking that happened has been for oil, which you can make no climate argument that there's a benefit to that, right? And so what we now know is that methane is 86 times more powerful over the 20-year time frame than carbon dioxide, and that it doesn't last as long in the atmosphere, but that because of this, it has a powerful effect in the short term. And the short term is, we know, the essential period of time for reversing catastrophic climate change. So this work that came to us originally out of a water concern has evolved and made it clear that it's a climate issue, and so now we're doing a lot of work on climate, and it's clear we have to move off fossil fuels, including natural gas, and onto 100% renewable energy. And that we need to do this quickly, that we need to front load this transition. We need over the next decade to make dramatic action. We're calling for an 80% transition over the next decade. And yeah, and it's possible, and it's a matter of building the political will to make it happen, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. So as we learned more about the issue of fracking, we also saw the research that fracking wells are disproportionately located in low-income communities. I think it's important to tie it to farming too, because many farmers are struggling to make a living and have leased their land to the oil and gas industry in an attempt to save their farms. It's also an environmental justice issue, and the urban drilling in California is located, disproportionately in communities of color. We now know that. In addition, the indigenous communities are being heavily impacted by drilling and fracking, and I'm sure you all followed the Dakota Access Pipeline fight, where the decision was made that it could be routed near the drinking water supplies of the indigenous community and rerouted around the drinking water supply of Bismarck, and that it was okay to uproot traditional cultural sites and burial grounds. In addition, there's this whole infrastructure associated with the fracking includes the byproducts that are the natural gas liquids. Sounds really technical, but I think it's important to point out that the fracking that's happening in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, the byproducts are being piped down to the Gulf and disproportionately affecting low-income communities and communities of color, where the petrochemical facilities are transforming those liquids into plastics, into fertilizers, and other polluting industries. And we saw that with the recent storms in Harvey, where there was, widespread air contamination and chemical contamination caused by the breakdown in these facilities due to the flooding. So we see how these are also environmental justice issues, and that environmental justice needs to be at the core of the work that we're doing to protect the environment and to avert catastrophic climate change, and we need to collaborate together. And then all of you probably know more than me about how the fossil fuel industry and the quest to control access to oil is at the center of so many international conflicts and war, right? Just a few stats. The Defense Department consumed almost 86 million barrels of fuel in 2016, the single largest consumer of fossil fuels, ensuring tremendous profit for the oil and gas industry. Many of the effects of climate change, such as drought and famine, will be the sources of conflicts in the future. And as we militarize and we prioritize that in the recent budget. I'm sure many of you followed that the Senate just passed $80 billion for the military. And as we make these choices about how we spend the taxpayer dollars, we're not choosing what's best for the public good when we're choosing to make those types of investment in the military. We did some quick calculations, and this increase in just the increase in military spending could be applied to renewable energy and would power 887,000 homes with solar, or over 1 million homes with wind power. And so the movement against extreme fossil fuels and against climate change and for environmental justice intersects with the peace movement. And I've learned even more examples of that today. So since these are multinational corporations pushing these damaging agendas, we must have strong global movements to push back. And just to give one example, I know I'm running out of time, of where that's happened, the anti-fracking movement, a lot of this happened first in the United States, but of course the fossil fuel industry is expanding around the world, from Europe to Australia, which Robin could tell you about, to Argentina. So it was very helpful to have in the US, it's important to know that before the movement in New York started, it was people in Wyoming who were reached out to and warned New Yorkers and of what was going to be coming because they had experienced it firsthand. And so that's what global movements can do, right? We can share the stories, which is what happened with fracking, and an international movement came together where the people who've suffered these horrible, losses to their property, quality of life, health, shared their stories. And we were part of putting together something called the Global Frack Down, which was really an international day of action. It's happening again this year on October 14th. But it was critical to share not only the examples, but the strategies that had worked, and we can share those strategies in a global movement. And I know activists from the United States have traveled to Australia, to Ireland, to Europe, to Mexico to share their stories, to researchers share what they've learned and the strategies for how we can fight back. And as many of you know, there are examples of victories in this movement. The ban on fracking in New York, followed by the one in Maryland this year, which I know some of you in this room were involved in, as was I. And then in Ireland, France, and the Netherlands, and the Ireland decision was recent. And so I think this just shows that our issues are interconnected, that we can share information and strategies that we need to reach across movements to build our power and to show solidarity on other issues, and that we can work together to face the challenges we face today. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. That was powerful. I forgot to introduce myself. I think I had too much of that delicious food. And so I'm Mary Dean. I'm an organizer with World Beyond War and a lifelong peace activist. And so if you're all wondering what to do after hearing all of this discussion, I would be the person to contact about, if you want to hold an event or show one of the videos from this conference, or if you want to start a new chapter in your town. So please contact me. I have business cards I can give you, and also my information is on the website. So, speaking of environmental issues and justice, when I was in Honduras for 6 months, that was really a strong movement that was going on, and indigenous people were being killed there over, resources and land, and so that's, powerful. Okay, so next up we have Robin Taubenfeld, all the way from Australia, and we're thrilled to have her here. She is a national nuclear spokesperson with Friends of the Earth Australia, a mother, teacher, artist, media maker, community maker, and a recipient of a Women's International League for Peace and Freedom's Peace Women Award 2016. And also yesterday we met her lovely daughter and sister. For 6 months in the Australian Northern Territory, opposing the Jabiluka uranium mine in the late 90s helped Robin understand that uranium is as much a social justice as an environmental issue. In the broader picture, much more a political issue than an economic one. Since that time, Robin has spent much of her time attempting to make the links between peace, social justice, and environmental issues, with a focus on militarization, nuclearization, and colonialization in Australia and the Pacific. Welcome, Robin. Thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you just did half of my talk. Thanks so much. My name is Robin Taubenfeld. I was born on what is reported to be shared Wichita, Comanche, Creek, Caddo, Cherokee, Kiowa land, known as Dallas, Texas, of people of Eastern European Jewish descent. I live and work on Jagera and Turrbal country in Meanjin, what is known as Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Regions in which I work and live are affected already by climate change to such an extent that climate mitigation and migration are the daily life reality, with sea level rise forcing some people off their ancestral lands while others have already been displaced, disfigured, or destroyed by nuclear testing and ongoing militarization of their homelands and seas. Sovereignty of those lands has never been ceded. Australia shares the legacy of colonization, nuclearization, and militarization with her neighbors in the Pacific and with the United States. I am grateful for the opportunity to meet with you today on the ancestral land. Please correct me if I'm wrong or I've pronounced it incorrectly. The Piscataway people of Nacotchtank, or the Anacostans. This is a picture of almost exactly 50 years ago today. Peace, anti-nuclear, and civil liberties and Aboriginal rights protesters reclaiming a street in Brisbane. This was the beginning of the long-term marches against the Vietnam War and the intersection of the uranium campaigns and the peace campaigns in Australia with the Aboriginal land rights movement. Where I grew up in Texas and later in Washington and Virginia, we rarely heard the studies of those regions as histories of invasion, colonization, or dispossession. When we studied slavery, we rarely associated the brutality of the past with trauma and disadvantage in the present. When I taught modern history in an Australian school, history started with the Industrial Revolution and basically consisted of World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. That's true. European and American-involved wars were the markers of time. Frontier wars were never considered. Aboriginal people in Australia die young, often live in poverty, are disproportionately represented in prisons, foster care systems, and in suicide rates, and are under constant pressure to barter their culture and connection to country or land for promised improvement of living conditions that urban Australians take for granted. In 1976, when the Ranger uranium mine was proposed, and now in what is now the World Heritage listed Kakadu National Park, the local traditional owners, the Mirarr people, consistently rejected the mine. The government invoked the National Interest Clause, and the mine was approved. The uranium mine brought with it services that the community did not have until then: electricity. Yes, electricity. This community did not have electricity, a healthcare center, or a school until they had a uranium mine on their traditional lands. Now, with the closure of the mine in sight, there is uncertainty about whether those services will remain in their community, though the toxic legacy of uranium tailings will remain for thousands of years. Uranium from the Ranger mine was used by TEPCO in the Fukushima nuclear reactors. The Mirarr people feel responsible for poison coming from their country and continue to oppose the mining and export of uranium. The nuclear weapons and waste cycle start in Australia with uranium mining. Australia has had uranium agreements with every nuclear weapon state. Australia has been a testing ground for British nuclear weapons, and now Australia fuels a nuclear arms race with its loyalty to the US military nuclear umbrella. I think I jumped ahead. From where we sit, we cannot separate the issues of Aboriginal disadvantage and dispossession and desecration of Aboriginal land from the support for US warfare in our region. Our campaigns for environmental justice and our calls for peace are inextricably linked to justice and sovereignty of First Nations people. Currently, we are being buzzed 24/7 by military jets and helicopters, and if the Singapore expansion happens, it will be for 6 months each year rather than 3, on top of the routine Australian defence exercises and the joint biannual ones. Unimaginative local MPs, members of parliament, and councillors want us to be the beef capital, the coal capital, and a military base, rather than a leader in sustainable energy, biodiversity conservation, and a livable community. This was from a friend who works for the Capricorn Conservation Council in Rockhampton when the federal government was trying to forcibly acquire land to expand the military training area used by the United States, which comprises the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park in their region. The forcible expansion has been stopped. The land is now being bought by the government to expand that military zone. Let's see. I might just hit it. Wyatt? Let's see if Wyatt can. Light-hearted look. Every 2 years, Australia hosts some of the world's largest military operations, exercise Talisman Sabre, joint U.S. combined force training, which sees thousands of personnel engaged in land, sea, and air maneuvers, live firing, bombing practice, the use of sonar, onshore landings, nuclear-powered and nuclear weapons-capable vessels. With support locations in cities around the country, the majority of the action takes place. War is bull. In Queensland, on and around the Great Barrier Reef, in the Northern Territory, the Coral Sea, the Arafura Sea, and the Timor Seas. Talisman Sabre 2017 involved 33,000 personnel, 20,000 US and 13,000 Aussies from late June to July 2017. Traditional owners of lands and waters used by the military have access to their land determined by the military. The Great Barrier Reef, the Saumarez Reef, the Timor, Arafura, and Coral Seas, the wet tropics World Heritage Areas, and Ramsar-listed wetlands comprise ecosystems of global significance, important bird migratory routes, whale migration routes, seagrass beds for the endangered dugong, and habitats of other endangered species. In 2013, the US accidentally jettisoned 4 bombs on the Great Barrier Reef when the pilot couldn't find his intended target. This accident is only the tip of the iceberg of regular ongoing environmental military impacts, publicized simply because it took place beyond the area of reefs designated for military use. In August, the U.S. Osprey, which you may have heard about, which crashed off the coast of Queensland when attempting to return to its ship, had also taken part in these war games. No matter where war games are conducted, however, U.S. and Australian battle fleets conducting nuclear-capable military exercises will set off political alarm bells in our region and remind the world that Australia is deeply involved and supported